All right, welcome back to Musicians Edition. Today we are going to look back in the snare drum book, snare drum part of Essential Elements, and we're going to start with number 99. The title is Take the Lead. So in Take the Lead, you see there are several eighth notes in here that have a Z through the stem of the note, right? And we know by this point in the book that these are buzz strokes, right? We're going to push the stick into the head of the drum and let it vibrate so that we get a buzz sound, right? Or so that our stick hits the head several different times, okay? So that's really the focus of this piece, is kind of working on our buzz stroke and also working on getting into and out of our buzz stroke, okay? So let's take a look at just these simple strokes, and then we'll kind of slowly work our way into mixing single strokes and buzz strokes, all right? So the first thing we're going to do is just take one of our hands. I like to start with my strong hand, right? And making sure that our grip is all good, right? Our back fingers are touching and we're pinching between the index finger and the thumb for our fulcrum, right? And I'm going to start this with snares off. I think sometimes it's just a little bit easier on my ears to practice these with the snares turned off. And then sometimes it helps me hear the buzzes a little more clearly when we don't have all the vibration from the snares going on too. So I recommend, practicing your buzz strokes, snares on, snares off, just to kind of keep it fresh, keep you listening in different ways, and also save your ears a little bit. Okay, so we're going to take our stick and we're just going to push it into the head of the drum and let it bounce, and let's see what it sounds like. Okay, so you want to play around with the feeling in your back fingers, right? And kind of mess around with that until you find whatever kind of level of pressure you need from your back fingers to get the stick to buzz for as long as you can, right? Or to get a consistent buzz for as long as you can, okay? So what I'm going to do here is start with a dead stroke, right? I'm going to start by not letting the stick bounce at all, right? Like this. Right, so I'm pushing the stick all the way down into the head to where I'm not getting any of those bounces or any of those buzzes, okay? And now what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to slowly loosen up my hand, right? Mostly in my middle ring and pinky, middle finger, ring finger, and pinky, right? And maybe loosen up at my fulcrum a little bit too, and then just listen to what happens to the sound, see if it starts getting longer, okay? So again, we'll start with that dead stroke, and then start to loosen up. And loosen up a little bit more. Okay, and then just keep going until you see how long you can get the buzzes to last, all right? So I'm going to do that same exercise now in my left hand. Start with a dead stroke, right? Notice the feeling I get in my hand from playing that dead stroke. And then slowly start to loosen up a little bit. Okay, and all the while I'm trying to build a relationship between my ears and my hands, right? I'm trying to listen to the sound of the drum and then be really aware of the feeling in my hand and how that relates to the sound of the drum, right? And slowly build that relationship so I know you start to learn what your hand needs to do in order to get the buzzes to be longer or shorter, depending on what your ears want to hear, right? So you can spend a good amount of time kind of warming up on this exercise, kind of starting with that dead stroke, and then loosening up into the buzz that you want to hear, right? Now that we've got our buzzes kind of nice and long, right, we can start to go through that same exercise now, but make it a little bit more complex, right? So what we're going to do is play 2 buzzes on one hand, 2 on the other, and we're going to go back and forth. And as we go back and forth, we're going to see if we can loosen up the same amount and get the same sound from each hand, okay? So we'll start with that dead stroke. Right hand, left hand. Right, now I've got my dead strokes happening. I think they sound pretty close to each other. I'm gonna start to loosen up. Okay, and then once you kind of do that exercise, it feels pretty good doing 2 of each. Now we'll move down to 1 of each, right? And you can do as many as you want. You could do 8 of each. You could do, 17 of each, whatever you want to do. Just kind of put it in some sort of cycle so that you can hear one hand versus the other hand, but not have to think too hard about going from hand to hand, okay? But now that we're comfortable with that step, now we're going to go from one hand to the other hand, right? And now we're starting to get much closer to what we're actually going to do in this piece today, right? So we'll start with that dead stroke, right hand and then left hand. Listen to see if they sound the same. Once we get them sounding the same, then we'll start to loosen up. Always listening and always being aware of the feeling in our hands, okay? So here we go. And you can hear when I started that my dead strokes didn't sound the same. So I'm going to, keep working with that until they do sound the same. And then once I get that sound to be really consistent, then I know it's time to start moving on, okay? So I'm going to try that again with the dead strokes. Okay, now the next step is to then do this a little bit faster. So we're going from right hand to left hand a little more quickly. And we want to try to get the buzzes to touch, right? We want to try to get the buzz on my right hand to last until the buzz on my left hand starts, and vice versa, right? And that way we get kind of a full sound that doesn't stop. And that's really what we're trying to achieve when we play buzz strokes, okay? So I'm gonna do the same thing again a little bit quicker. And then when I loosen up into the buzzes, I'm going to try to listen, see if I can get the buzzes to last long enough that they start to touch each other, okay? And then once you get to some longer buzzes, then you can play with speeding up a little bit to get the buzzes to touch, right? So if they're really close, but you're not quite able to get them long enough, then you can just speed up your hands just a little bit so that the buzzes touch, right? Then if you're having success with that, you can practice slowing down your buzzes, right? And that actually makes it more difficult because then the buzzes themselves have to be longer in order to last until the next one begins, okay? So that's buzz strokes. It takes a while to get used to doing that, right? So spend a good amount of time, before you start working on the piece, spend a good amount of time warming up on that just every day. Every time that you go to practice, or at the beginning of class when maybe your teacher gives you a few minutes to kind of get set up and warm up on your own, you grab some sticks and work out those buzzes, right? The more time you spend playing buzz strokes and listening to the buzz strokes, the better that relationship between your ears and your hands is going to develop, and then the better your buzzes will sound. Now that we have our buzzes happening, we need to work on going from buzzes to single strokes, okay? So the way we're gonna do that is to start with one hand. We're gonna play a certain number of buzzes. For now, we're gonna use 2 of each, right? You can do more or less. depending on how comfortable it is for you. Usually more buzzes will make it a little bit easier because you won't have to think about switching back and forth so often. But then over time, you want to work your way down to smaller numbers, okay? So we'll start with 2 buzzes, and then we're going to immediately play 2 single strokes, and then back to buzzes, back to single strokes. And you just want to notice what your hand has to do to differentiate between those 2 stroke types, okay? So we'll start with buzzes, nice and long, 2 of them, and then singles. Okay, then we'll practice the same thing in the other hand. Okay, and again, always listening, trying to make sure that your single strokes are a consistent sound and that your buzz strokes are a consistent sound. And once that's comfortable, now we can do right hand goes through that cycle once, and then left hand goes through the cycle once. Okay, and then the next step is going to be to do 1 of each. So buzz, single, other hand, buzz, single, okay? So we'll try that. All right, and then once that's comfortable, then we're going to do buzz on the right, buzz on the left, single on the right, single on the left, right? So we're going buzz, buzz, single stroke, okay? We'll try that. Okay, and then you can mix that up into different numbers, right? So maybe do 4 of each, maybe a little quicker. You could do 8 of each. Maybe do 6 of each. Right? And once you spend some time doing those exercises, now you're ready to put these buzzes in context with the piece where we're going to have to go from buzz strokes to single strokes and back and forth, right? But I really recommend spending some time getting comfortable switching between those 2 stroke types before you try to look at the music and do it in context, okay? So now let's put it with the rhythms that we see in number 99, right? The first step is we need to think about the rhythm here, right? In the first measure, we have 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and our buzz, right? So we have 1 and a 2 and a buzz, 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 right? The next measure is pretty similar with a little different rhythm on beat 2. So we end up with 1 and a 2 and a buzz, 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 right? And then measure 3, we have 1 and a buzz, buzz, 3 and a buzz, buzz, okay? And then the last measure, 1 and a 2 and a buzz, buzz, quarter note on 4, okay? It's always important to try to think through this before you try it with your hands, right? Make sure that your mind knows what to do before you ask your hands to do it, all right? Now what we're going to do is baby step our way into this, right? First, we're going to leave out all the buzzes. We're not going to play any buzzes in this piece, right? We're just going to play the rhythms that we see. So at the beginning, we'll play all 4 measures right from the beginning, but leave out the buzzes. Just play single strokes on those 8 notes, okay? Okay, and then once you can do that, now let's try it with the buzzes, all right? Here we go. Ready, and... Okay. And then once you kind of get it together, then remind yourself, like we were doing when we were warming up on these buzzes, to listen to the buzzes, see if you can get them to touch each other, right? So let's try it one more time. Really turn your ears on. Think about that relationship between your hands and your ears. Okay, here we go. Last time through. 2 and ready, go. All right. So now we did a lot of baby steps working our way into this, right? And you always want to try to work your way slowly into what you have to do in the music, right? Start simple and then work your way into it, right? Start by just working on your buzzes and then move on to going from buzzes to single strokes and back and forth, right? And then work on counting the rhythm and then work on playing the rhythm without the buzzes. And then finally bring it all together, right? That'll keep you from kind of running into some roadblocks and getting frustrated along the way, right? So take your time, work your way slowly into it, and happy practicing.